Before we focus on the process of photosynthesis, particularly in plant cells, let us first survey the different ways by which cells harvest the energy that they need. So there are two main ways, either through heterotrophy, and that's the acquisition of energy by getting it from another source, like food, or autotrophy, the making of own energy, the cell's own energy, from, say, light energy or chemical energy. So we can see here that a representative of heterotrophy is the process of cellular respiration, wherein sugars like glucose, with the aid of oxygen, which is the electron acceptor, is broken down to become carbon dioxide, and oxygen receiving the electrons becomes water. In the process, ATP or energy is a product. In autotrophy, as we see here, energy is actually used instead of being produced to make food. So here we can see how carbon dioxide plus an energy source, which is used to reduce the carbon dioxide, are reacted together with the help of energy, either through or from chemicals or from light, to produce sugar, as we see here, particularly glucose, plus a waste product. So in photoautotrophy, this energy source is light, either sunlight or light from your fluorescent bulbs. It can be synthetic light, for example. So there are certain bacteria actually that have evolved very early on in the history of life, and they are still extant now, that use a very distinct type of electron source in making their food. So like this sulfur bacteria that we see here, they use hydrogen sulfide as a source of electron. Okay, so the electron is used to reduce the carbon in carbon dioxide, and with the help of light as a source of energy, food in the form of glucose is formed, plus a waste product. Now, since the source of electron here is the hydrogen sulfide, the waste product here is sulfur. So that's why we call this a sulfur bacteria. They may be found in volcanic areas where hydrogen sulfide is always present, being released from the earth. Then we have photoautotrophs like the plants. So the plants actually use an electron source we know now as water. Okay, so H2O. So notice the structure of H2O is very similar with that of hydrogen sulfide. Now, because water is a source of energy here to reduce carbon and carbon dioxide to become sugar, the waste product is oxygen gas instead of sulfur. So notice now where the oxygen gas comes from in photosynthesis. It doesn't come from the carbon dioxide. The carbon in the carbon dioxide is reduced to become the sugar. But the oxygen is actually a product of the splitting of water, because electrons from the water are used to reduce the carbon dioxide into sugar. Okay, so again, the oxygen here comes from the water. So here's a summary of the different photoautotrophy chemical reactions. Now, the chloroplast is the main organelle for photosynthesis. Okay, so the chloroplasts are usually concentrated in the cells of plants that are found in the mesophyll, in the leaves, in the tissues in the middle between the epidermis, the upper and the lower epidermis of the leaf. And there are two mesophyls. We have the spongy mesophyll at the bottom and sort of a palisade mesophyll at the top. So all of these mesophyll cells are rich in chloroplasts. And these chloroplasts contain the pigment chlorophyll, which help harvest energy from light. So as we learned from the previous video, the chloroplast is quite big as compared to the mitochondrion, so that it's visible even under light microscopy. So this is a structure of the chloroplast. It has two layers of membranes, an outer and an inner membrane. But in addition to that, it also has membranous stacks within its stroma. Okay? So these membranous stacks are known as thylakoids. And when they are stacked together like coins, they are known as grana. And the thylakoids themselves, the insides would be hollow. So there is a thylakoid space inside the thylakoid. So here we can see the grana, which are very finely stacked together. And the stroma, which will be the spaces between the grana. So each granum here is made up of a stack of thylakoids. And each thylakoid, although very thin, actually have space enough inside we call the thylakoid membrane. So this is a summary of what's happening in photosynthesis and cellular respiration in terms of chemical reactions and in terms of changes in free energy. Notice that for photosynthesis, the change in free energy is positive. Okay, the final product, which is the carbohydrate or the sugar, is actually more energy rich than the original reactant, which is the carbon dioxide. While in cellular respiration, the final product, which would be the carbon dioxide and the water, would be less in terms of amount of energy than the original reactant, which is the sugar. So this is a structure of chlorophyll. Okay, so very important. Chlorophyll actually resembles a phospholipid in structure. Okay, so we can see here on top the porphyrin ring, which is actually a bit of hydrophilic as compared to the phytol tail that we see here, which is hydrophobic. So the chlorophyll, just like phospholipids, would be found embedded in a membrane, the membranes of the thylakoids. Okay, and then there are other pigments like carotene, and these different pigments have different properties in terms of their absorption of light, which also affects the color, their color as we perceive them. So take note here, chlorophyll also contains the metal magnesium, and that's very important. And there are two main types of chlorophyll. We have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. And in terms of structure, their difference would be the attachments of certain groups here. Okay? So for example, this one's for chlorophyll A, and the other one is for chlorophyll B only. So in terms of their absorption, we see here, okay, on the y-axis going up would be the amount of absorption they have for that certain color of light. Okay? Notice that for chlorophylls A and B, they have high amounts of absorption here in the purple and blue color, but in the green color, they mostly reflect those, green and yellow. And for chlorophyll A, a bit of blue is reflected, so that chlorophyll A appears blue-green in our eyes, and chlorophyll B appears yellow-green. And of course, as we see here, carotenes or carotenoids reflect mostly the colors from green to red, thus appearing orange, and it absorbs purple, blue, and some blue-green colors. So you might be asking, what's the purpose of the carotenoids? The carotenoids actually help in moderating the amount of energy from light that's being absorbed by the chlorophylls. Okay, because the chlorophylls are the main workers here for harvesting light. But if ever there's too much light, that can also destroy the chlorophyll molecule. And so the carotenoids help by absorbing some of those wavelengths of light. As opposed to the absorption spectrum, okay, as we see here on the left, there is also what we call as the action spectrum of chlorophyll. Okay, the action spectrum shows against the color that's being absorbed by chlorophyll, on which colors would chlorophyll be most active. Okay, so as opposed to the absorption spectrum, this just shows us which colors are absorbed more and which are absorbed less. But here in the action spectrum, we see on which colors would chlorophyll be most active. That's why it's called an action spectrum. There was an experiment. So there was a filament of green algae. This is Spirogyra. And then in the experiment, the scientists actually exposed a length of Spirogyra to different colors of lights, as we see here. So we have the different colors as we see in the rainbow. And the scientists also cultured in that same setup aerobic bacteria, meaning to say bacteria that need oxygen in order to live. And of course, we know that one product of photosynthesis is oxygen, and where photosynthesis is much happening because the chloroplasts and the chlorophyll are working, oxygen would be released in that area. And notice here where the aerobic bacteria are aggregating. Here in the purple, blue color, and here in the yellow, orange, and red color. That means to say the chlorophyll is very much active in this area and a lot of oxygen is being released here, as opposed to the area here in the green color, where no bacteria aggregate because there's no presence of oxygen there, because photosynthesis apparently is not happening there. And so we arrive at this action spectrum. And if we combine, we can see which type of chlorophyll is most likely the main worker of the two, because we have chlorophyll A and B. Notice where the spikes are actually aligning, and those are the spikes of chlorophyll A. So meaning to say chlorophyll A is the main worker among the two types of chlorophyll, A or B.